coming up on The World Today. A 7.0 magnitude earthquake hits Greece and Turkey, bringing deaths and floods. Southern French city of Nice is mourning after deadly church stabbings. Plus, France returns to national lockdown amid a surge in COVID-19 cases. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. A powerful earthquake has struck off Turkey's Aegean coast north of the Greek island of Samos. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the 7.0 magnitude tremor was centered off Turkey's Izmir province. Turkey put the magnitude of the quake at 6.6, saying 4 people had died and 120 were injured in the city of Izmir. About 20 buildings collapsed. The shallow tremor is reported to have triggered a mini tsunami that flooded Izmir and the Greek port of Samos. The USGS says the quake, which was felt as far away as Athens and Istanbul, struck at a depth of 10 kilometers, although Turkish officials say it was 16 kilometers below ground. Well, it's a day after the deadly knife attack in a church in southern French city of Nice, and residents are in mourning. A makeshift memorial has been set up outside the Notre Dame Basilica, where people have placed flowers and lit candles for the 3 people stabbed to death in a suspected jihadist attack. French President Emmanuel Macron said Thursday's stabbings were an Islamist terrorist attack. He is to hold an emergency meeting with senior ministers today. Meanwhile, security has been stepped up at places of worship and schools across France following 2 similar attacks within 2 weeks. Earlier this month, a teacher was beheaded in a Paris suburb after showing controversial cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to some of his pupils. France is now in a new national lockdown that will last at least a month as it aims to curb one of Europe's biggest coronavirus surges and ease the pressure on its hospitals. There were record traffic jams around Paris on Thursday evening, with many people heading for rural accommodation. Schools and workplaces remain open, but people need permits to leave home. The downloadable exemptions are for essential shopping, trips for medical reasons, or for getting to work. Home working is urged wherever possible. People are also allowed to go out for exercise for a maximum of an hour in their local area. The fine for breaking the rules is 135 euros. The VOA's correspondent Lisa Bryant is in Paris, from where she joins us now. Lisa, thanks for joining us on the program.
It's a pleasure as always.
So tell us, I hope you weren't too affected by the traffic jam in Paris today. What's the situation on ground now, and why are people so eager to leave the city?
No, I stayed put, but I did walk out to do the errands, and it was very quiet. That said, very relaxed. I didn't see a single policeman in sight. I think they're being laid back for the weekend because it's kind of this cross current of people. Some people are coming back to Paris because there have been vacations, and the lockdown was actually called in the middle of the All Saints' Day vacation, or the vacation leading up to it. People are eager to leave because it's nicer to be in the countryside if you have the choice and you have to telecommute. So this happened last time, the last lockdown in March, and there was just everybody left the city in droves. And we saw a little bit of that this time, but it's more confused because there are also a chunk of the country is out already in the countryside with their kids because it was school vacation. So they're going to be coming back, and we're going to see how the next days are. But Emmanuel Macron has basically told the law and order forces to just be laid back over the weekend because there's so much cross traffic.
Well, as you mentioned, this lockdown is much different from the one we saw in March, as school and workplaces are to remain open. Are people welcoming this measure to bringing infection rates down?
Not really, no. I mean, the first time, it was a bit different, and there was a sense that there was an ending in sight. There was going to be a lockdown, and then it was going to be over. The sense now is like, when is it going to be over? And I went out with another journalist a couple of nights ago, just when President Macron was announcing the lockdown, and everybody was kind of having a last time at the bar, and people were bracing for losing their jobs. So we're not seeing, these balcony concerts where everybody is saluting the healthcare staff. It's a grimmer atmosphere this time around.
Well, let's move over to the security situation in the country now. Following yesterday's deadly attack, the city of Nice is in mourning. President Emmanuel Macron is said to host a security meeting any time now. What more do we know about the suspect and the motive for that attack?
We're still waiting to hear about the motive, but according to reports, the suspect is a Tunisian man. He had arrived quite recently first to Lampedusa, the place where a lot of people who cross the Mediterranean end up in Italy. It's an island off of Italy. He had somehow made his way to Nice. There's no clear date so far about when he arrived, but he had sort of gotten papers to leave Italy as of early October. His name is Ibrahim Isawi, and there has been at least one Arabic channel who has interviewed his parents, his family, a brother, and I think his mother, and it didn't seem to further the story. So, according to at least one report, Tunisian authorities are saying that it's an online claim for the killings of the three people in Nice on Thursday. With a previously unknown sort of jihadist group in Tunisia. So I think there are a lot of question marks to answer. We also know that there's a man in his late 40s who was arrested by French authorities who apparently had contact with the suspect the night before the attacks. So again, lots of question marks as you're asking, and we do know that France is increasing the security presence, raise a security alert to the highest level, and is bracing for the potential of more attacks.
Well, as you mentioned, security has been stepped up at places of worship and schools across France, but what's the mood like in the country? Do people feel safe?
I think that people have never quite felt safe since the Charlie Hebdo attacks. I think that really shook the nation. But right now, they're kind of grappling with twin crises. They've got the sort of the crises of radical Islam and these lone wolf terror attacks, 3 so far in less than 2 months. But then their immediate life is really the lockdown. That's their day-to-day life. How they're going to juggle work and kids and just everything else. So yes, people are on alert, but they have other worries right now, including the economic impact of coronavirus. So it's a very tough time here, as it is in a lot of other countries.
Yes, well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us and bringing some clarity to those situations. Please stay safe out there.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Well, more than 81 million people have already voted ahead of the U.S. Election Day on November 3rd. The country is on course for its highest electoral turnout rate in more than a century. The two candidates, President Donald Trump and Joe Biden, will head to the Midwest later on today, another key battleground. Now, this comes after dueling rallies in Florida on Thursday, when they again highlighted their different approaches to tackling the coronavirus. President Trump said his rival wanted to lock people down, while Mr. Biden criticized the president's super spreader events.
Think of it, 64% of the stories about Sleepy Joe are positive. How the hell do you have a positive story about this guy? How do you have a positive story about him? This election is a choice between my plan to deliver historic, and you know what this is going to be, right? Historic. This is historic prosperity. Another major tax cut to go along with the biggest tax cut in the history of our country. and record job growth. And Joe Biden's plan is to deliver punishing lockdowns. He's going to lock you down.
Ladies and gentlemen, the heart and soul of this country is at stake. Right here in Florida. It's up to you. You hold the key. If Florida goes blue, it's over. It's over. This is not a political statement. It's a patriotic duty, for God's sake. But still, Trump refuses to listen to the science. And we shouldn't be politicizing the race for a vaccine either. We should be planning its safe and equitable and free distribution, providing the funding for PPE, the mask, and everything we need to protect ourselves. Thank you all so much for being here.
Our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now for more on this. Maria, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So this is the last weekend before the U.S. election. The day is literally already here. What can we expect from both candidates this weekend?
You're exactly right. We are right here at the weekend before, and both candidates are going to be very busy out on the campaign trail. We know that many of the states that are expected to go red potentially could go blue. States like Texas, states like Arizona, we're seeing Wisconsin. So many people are, going to be going out to many of these rallies, but most of them social distancing rallies. And the ones that are going to be located in Wisconsin are going to have limits of 250 people due to the rise in COVID-19 in many of the states across the United States. And so we're going to see them hitting the trails. We know the vice presidents will also be hitting the trails, and you will see them in various states across the country.
Well, Maria, do you think you can give us a feel of what voters are saying at this time and what the polls are saying about the candidates?
What we know at this time is that the voters are very eager to vote, and people are either on one side or the other. You don't have many people that are in the middle at this time. And so I think that the message around the fact that you have to get out to vote, whether or not people are happy with President Trump, they know how close the election was and what was being said last time. And they also are very aware of the fact that there are many people that are going to be supporting presidential candidate Joe Biden. And so we know that the polls are going to have record numbers of individuals just due to the fact that people are aware that their voice must be heard through their vote.
Well, speaking of record numbers of voters, already more than 81 million people have cast their ballots, more than we've seen at this stage compared to the previous years. So what's the driving factor here?
The driving factor is people have a very clear vision of what they want for their future. Many people are upset around the coronavirus. They've lost their jobs, economic instability. We're dealing with climate change challenges. But there are many others that are saying that they believe that President Trump has done a phenomenal job. And President Trump has been so different than most of our presidents in the past that they want to see that administration continue. And so they're going to get out to support him hard and heavy.
Well, Maria, one last question before I let you go here. Are we likely to have a repeat of what we saw in 2016 when the polls didn't necessarily match the electoral vote?
You're exactly correct. Many people are fearful of that, those especially who are supporting presidential candidate Joe Biden and vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris. And so they are going out and they're being very clear to say, even though the poll might say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are a little bit ahead, don't believe that. Get out to vote because we need each and every vote in order to ensure that if the Democratic Party is to win. And I think the Trump administration and those who are supporting President Trump are very aware that message is being brought out. And so they, too, are encouraging their base to get out to vote.
All right. Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on the election there. Maria, thank you so much for joining us, and do stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
New Zealand has provisionally voted to legalize euthanasia, but is on course to reject law changes that would allow recreational marijuana use. New Zealand voted on the 2 referendums this month while casting ballots during a general election that returned Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern to power. Full results from the Electoral Commission will be published on November 6th, but with more than 65.2% of voters in favor of the recently passed legislation permitting euthanasia, New Zealand will become the 7th country to allow assisted suicide. The law, which allows terminal patients with less than 6 months to live to request assisted suicide, will come into effect November 2021.
The end-of-life choice referendum has been won, 65.2%.
Isn't that fantastic?
It's amazing. It's just amazing.
It's been a long time, and a lot of these people who were here tonight, they are absolutely ecstatic because I've been touched so deeply by the pain and the suffering.
Now that it's passed, the risks remain. So we're deeply concerned and worried for the future for vulnerable people.
Very much prepared for this not to come through on the initial vote, but the specials are what matters. And what we know is that there's 500,000 specials yet to be counted, and 2020 has thrown us a number of curveballs, so there's every potential this comes through.
It's good news for young people that they're not going to be enlisted in a social experiment, because frankly we can leave that to the Canadians and the Americans.
I'm actually quite surprised that in the progressive age that we're in, it's that it hasn't gone through.
We should have legalised that, absolutely. You know, take it out of your crime land and give it to the people. I've got a plant at home.
Legal or not, people are going to do it, so why not make it legal, you know?
Meanwhile, Australia must form a national body to lead natural disaster responses, change laws to allow a countrywide state of emergency, and simplify climate change projections. Now, that's according to an inquiry into the country's worst bushfire season in a generation. The report by the Royal Commission inquiry adds that Australia also faces an increased frequency of natural disasters because of climate change, escalating the financial costs and impacting hundreds of thousands of homes. Many of the report's recommendations involves improving coordination between state and federal authorities, after public criticism about confusion between organizations responding to the blazes, often on either side of state lines.
Well, today a landmark report has been tabled in Parliament, the report of the Royal Commission into the bushfires last summer. This report is incredible. It covers every aspect of emergency planning, preparation, response and recovery. Prior to this, the biggest landmark report in emergency management in Australia was the Royal Commission into the 1939 bushfires. This report will totally change the landscape of emergency management. The main point made in this report is that the Black Summer bushfires would not have happened if not for the effects of climate change and a warming planet. It makes the point that we can expect fires like this and other disasters like floods, cyclones, heat waves into the future because of climate change, because of emissions. It calls for action to mitigate the effects of climate change, and that means a change in policy from the government on
There are
Well, across Europe, hospitals are filling up at an alarming pace that mirror the darkest hours of the first wave of the pandemic in the spring. The authorities are scrambling to slow the spread of a virus that threatens to bring ailing healthcare systems to the brink of collapse. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Belgians are bracing up for more restrictions to be announced as more than half of the country's 2,000 intensive care beds are full. In Germany, as hospitalizations have doubled in the past 10 days and nearly 1,500 patients are in intensive care, Chancellor Angela Merkel announced new lockdown measures on Wednesday as she vows to avoid situations that are extremely difficult. Poland now has its highest level of restrictions to date, with public gatherings banned, most schools closed, and restaurants and cafes only offering takeaway service. 13 of Spain's 17 autonomous regions have now stopped movement in and out of their areas. Valencia is the latest to close its borders for the next week.
And finally on the program today, the theme of this year's Recrea Trails music and dance event is Standing Up, as the Burkina Festival tackles the issues of rising violence and a global pandemic. Recrea Trails in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, goes beyond street theater, bringing dance, theater, and music into people's homes.
Art can be an escape from the realities of daily life. But at a festival in Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, they're facing up to a global crisis. The 11th edition of Le Recretrales, an annual music and dance event, is being held against a backdrop of rising violence in the region and the world in lockdown. Sergei Aimi Koulibaly choreographed one of the performances, titled Wakat.
Wakat means the present time, and the present time is not fun at all. We are messed up, like one of the actors says in the play. We are messed up, and we are trying to find a different humanity through different energies that we forgot about.
The defiant theme for this year's event is Standing Up. Agwibo Bogobali Sanu is the stage director of Gumtiego, which means chameleon.
Today, the world has turned into a chameleon. Everything is changing. Everything is adapting. We are in a period of change. Should we languish because the world is not going well today? Or should we adapt and make the world a better place?
There are 3 different major performances a night for a week during Recretrales, which has become a major annual event in the West African arts calendar.
Well, that is all for the program today. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great weekend and stay safe.